It's like, does anyone have a question?
Stuart, can
Uh,
you talk a little bit about um, how we handle fear, not so much in class, but in daily life?
yeah, I talk much about this. Look, uh, fear isn't necessarily an unhealthy thing. Now, I know we're not taught this, and but it's true. I mean, fear is like, it's like a buoy, telling a ship, you know, that there are rocks there, the coast is there, and to be careful how the trip navigates the course that it's on. Fear is very similar to that. The problem with fear is we let the mind get involved. We get the emotions involved. And when the mind and emotions get involved, fear becomes like a Frankenstein. It becomes a creature that overtakes us and cripples us inside. All it is kind of a warning. Be careful. It's telling you, that there's something dangerous maybe going on in the vicinity of where you are. It's something telling you that you might have to be stepping into the unknown. You might have to be dealing with an energy force that is not familiar to you, you're not used to. And it's healthy that way. Well, the problem is we let our minds get involved, we get our emotions involved, and they create a creature, they create and paralyze us inside because they build the fear up into something which is overwhelming. And if we can just keep that from taking place, the fear is like a buoy telling a ship, be careful as you navigate this area of your life. So, there's a lot of the biggest fear is the fear of the unknown. And we all have to deal with that because as much as we think we know about life, very few people know really anything about life. I mean, you could probably fit into 5% of consciousness what people know about life. So they're constantly stepping into the unknown, into uncharted territory. And there's fear. Understand? There's fear of the unknown. It's a fear that extends, to the fact that people are afraid one day they're not going to be here anymore. They work and build a life and, you know, make money and relationships and family and this, and one day they're not here anymore. And there's a crippling fear inside of people about the unknown. As Shakespeare, that undiscovered territory from whose bourne no traveler returns. And this is where fear stems from. My solution to this is if a person isn't afraid of life, if they're not afraid of experiencing the unknown, in which most creativity exists. Boy, it's amazing. People leaving a talk like this, one after the other. I don't get that. That's something very strange to me. Unless it they're afraid of listening to what I'm talking about. I don't know. But anyway, fear is, look, it's fear of the unknown, fear of having to deal with life, which is almost an unknown quality to all of us, except for the small little world that we live in. You step out of that world and you understand it's the unknown. And this is where people have probably one of the deepest levels of fear inside them, dealing with the unknown. And I firmly believe in something very real. I mean, if we learn how to build a system inside that allows us to truly embrace life and to be happy people and to be people full of love and full of consciousness and full of compassion for life, you understand? This will overcome the fear of the unknown. This will enable us to have a capacity to deal with that unknown quantity that all of us have to step into one day. And I think this is a key to that. Overcoming fear is a very important element in growing spiritually. Because when you grow spiritually, you are constantly dealing with the unknown. And I think it's overcoming the fear of living. Once we overcome the fear of living, there is no more fear of death. Listen, because most of life is an unknown quantity. And we have mastered in ourselves the capacity to step into the unknown, to open to the unknown. All creative energy comes from the unknown. And we have the capacity to open and allow that creative energy to guide our lives. We are no longer afraid of it. So fear has many dimensions. It has many, many dimensions. And I think it's a really important subject. And it's something that every human being has to deal with. And once they're no longer afraid of living, they're not going to be afraid of dying. Once they're no longer afraid of allowing themselves to open to the unknown and all of that creative and wonderful energy that exists in the unknown, you understand? They will overcome the fear of dying. And that is a major step in mastering fear. If we master living, we will master the fear of dying. We will embrace it because the two of them do a sacred dance. Life and death is a sacred dance. And the soul has to move through both levels of consciousness in order to evolve and become one with God. Now, this is not an easy subject, and it's a subject that freaks out most of the human race, frankly. But it's a really important subject because every single human being has to deal with this. One day I'm not here anymore. Why am I making all this effort to build this life for myself? Well, one day I'm not going to be here anymore. And that creates fear, anxiety, insecurity. It also creates huge ego. In order to justify being alive. So the question is very, very good. The answer is very difficult, and it requires a person growing very deep inside themselves in order to master what I'm talking about. And it's one of the great elements of the evolution of consciousness in a human being, overcoming fear, not allowing fear to become Frankenstein, some kind of monster that lives inside us, because we have built a system inside that can deal with it. And we can listen to the sound of the buoy and navigate our lives accordingly. And we're not afraid to step into the unknown. I mean, if you think about it, 98% of all creative energy exists in the unknown. What human beings can understand about life is maybe 5%. I mean, even, what's Einstein just shrugged his shoulders and said, it must be God. It was too much for him to comprehend. It must be God. It was beyond, this guy had a brain, I mean, what, a 300 IQ or something? It was, it must be God. I don't understand all of this. And one, you know, overcomes the fear by allowing themselves to truly live experientially. They're no longer trying to figure out life, they are living life organically. Every day, they are living organically their lives. And they don't have to figure out what this is all about because, frankly, they'll never figure it out. And it'll just make them crazy. Their minds get very tight, they're conflicted, their whole bodies become that way, and trying to figure out what this is all about. There's no figuring it out. The brain isn't big enough on any human being, but we can become one with it. We can become a living example of spiritual energy flowing through and guiding a person's life if we build the system inside that allows us to do it. And that allows us to overcome fear. I know this isn't an easy subject, but I mean, it's something every person has to deal with every day of their life. And there is a way to deal with it. And it's not by figuring out what this all, it's by becoming a living, organic being who is totally, you know, conscious of living in the moment and open to that higher energy. So that energy guides their life and they live their life in the now, in the present. Now, this requires building a very strong chakra system. That gives one the capacity to do what I'm talking about. And in building that kind of system, we overcome fear. Does anyone else have a question they would like to? And truthfully, you got to be able to laugh at yourself. I really mean that. Another way of overcoming fear is the capacity to laugh at oneself. Schmuck, what are you doing? What are you afraid of? What is intimidating you and threatening? Not saying it to somebody else, but to yourself. Have a good laugh at yourself. Breaks up a lot of tension. I love that. I always quote it and I love it, that quote from Macbeth, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. I mean, it's probably the most wonderful piece of existential poetry ever written, and it so sums up the condition of humanity. Tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And then he goes, out, out, brief candle. Life is but a passing shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour on the stage and then is heard no more. And then my favorite, it's a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. I mean, you pick up the media and you read on it's a tale told by an idiot. What's going on in the world today, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Because one day it's all going to be like, as I always say, a fart in a hurricane. Not as quite as poetic, but metaphorically, it says the exact same thing. Most of all of the stuff that goes on today. And that's life. And instead of getting depressed and unhappy and fearful of it, we can build a system that can deal with it. And it doesn't have to be tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, because most of life is that, this petty pace that just continues till the last syllable of recorded time. It could be an extraordinary moment to moment of consciousness, of joy, of love, of creativity. Does anyone else have a question? Great question, Faith. Brought up a long answer. Thank you. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask? I hope you all show up for class tomorrow. After this ends. I don't know. Stuff I talk about lately has been pretty strong, strong stuff. Does anyone have a question? Oh, we had a great retreat last weekend. Everything was on this kind of level, very profound energy, very deep, experiences. It was really wonderful. Does anyone else have a question? Okay, thank you. Thank you, all of you. God bless you all. And I say it every day. You're probably sick of hearing it, but thank you for being in my life. Thank you for being in these classes and for really demanding that I work at a depth on myself that I think is helping me to grow and allowing my soul to get closer and closer to God. So God bless you all. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening. And there'll be a class tomorrow at 1 o'clock my time, and then this class will be Wednesday, at 7:30 my time. Have a wonderful evening and bless you, all of you.
Oh, thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Stuart.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart.
You're welcome. Good night.
Night.